What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actresses walks onto the stage of America's most unpredictable daytime talk show and refuses to stay silent when the conversation turns personal? Before we dive into this unforgettable clash, make sure you subscribe to the Echo View, hit that like button, and drop a comment below because this story only gets more explosive from here. The studio lights inside the View glowed brighter than usual that morning. Producers moved quickly behind the cameras. Audience members whispered excitedly into each other's ears as they waited for the live broadcast to begin. Something about the energy felt tense, different, like everyone in the room sensed a storm before the first word had even been spoken. And then she walked out. Natalie Portman entered with calm elegance, dressed in a sleek black blazer, her expression soft but guarded. The audience erupted into applause instantly. Some stood to their feet. Others pulled out their phones, hoping to capture a moment from the Oscar-winning actress everyone admired for her intelligence as much as her performances. At the panel sat Sunny Hostin alongside the other hosts, smiling warmly as the cameras rolled. "Welcome back to The View," Sunny said brightly. "Today we are joined by Academy Award winner Natalie Portman." Applause thundered through the studio again. Natalie smiled politely, waving gently before taking her seat. For the first few minutes, everything seemed normal. They discussed Natalie's latest film project, motherhood, balancing fame with privacy, and her years in Hollywood. Natalie answered carefully, gracefully even, choosing thoughtful words that made the audience lean in closer. She spoke with calm intelligence, never rushing a sentence. But Sunny kept watching her. Not casually, closely, like she was waiting for the perfect opening. "And you've always been known," Sunny began slowly, "as someone very outspoken socially and politically. But recently, some fans feel you've become quieter." The audience shifted. Natalie's smile faded just slightly. "Well," Natalie answered carefully, "I think there's a difference between being quieter and being more intentional." Sunny tilted her head. "Intentional or cautious?" A few audience members let out uncomfortable laughs. Natalie remained composed. "I think public conversations today can become very performative. Sometimes people stop listening and start competing." Sunny smiled, but it didn't fully reach her eyes. "So are you saying people on shows like this are performative?" The audience reacted immediately with nervous murmurs. One producer near the stage suddenly looked toward another crew member. Natalie gave a small laugh. "No, I'm saying modern discourse in general can become that way." But Sunny didn't let go. "Because some critics have said celebrities like you only speak when it's safe." The air changed instantly. Even the audience applause signs seemed irrelevant now. Natalie blinked once. Slowly. "You invited me here to discuss my work," she replied calmly. "Not internet criticism." Sunny leaned forward. "But criticism comes with influence." Whoopi Goldberg glanced sideways immediately, sensing the tension growing faster than expected. Sunny continued. "You have millions of followers. People look at your silence during certain moments and wonder if it's selective." The audience went silent. Natalie crossed her legs carefully, her posture tightening for the first time. "I don't believe every human issue should become a celebrity performance," she answered. Sunny's eyebrows lifted. "So silence is better?" "No," Natalie said firmly now. "Thoughtfulness is better." The audience gave cautious applause. Sunny nodded slowly, but her expression sharpened. "You know," she said, "people often use words like thoughtful when they really mean protected." A louder reaction swept through the room. Even Joy Behar looked surprised by how direct Sunny had become. Natalie inhaled quietly. For a second, it looked like she might ignore the comment entirely. But then something shifted in her face. Not anger. Disappointment. "I think what's dangerous," Natalie said carefully, "is reducing every complicated issue into a television soundbite." The audience clapped louder this time. Sunny's smile disappeared. "But isn't that convenient?" she fired back. "To say conversations are too complicated whenever accountability enters the room?" Gasps spread across the audience. Whoopi immediately jumped in. "All right now." But Sunny continued speaking over her. "Because some people watching feel celebrities get praised for intelligence while avoiding hard positions." Natalie stared directly at Sunny now. Her calmness had become colder. "You don't know my positions," she said quietly. Sunny answered instantly. "Then clarify them." The room exploded with noise. Audience members looked at each other in disbelief. One woman in the front row covered her mouth completely. Whoopi leaned back in her chair, clearly stunned. Natalie looked down briefly, almost collecting herself emotionally before responding. "You know what's interesting?" she said softly. Sunny folded her arms. Natalie continued. "There's a difference between asking questions and trying to corner someone for entertainment." The audience erupted. Some clapped loudly. Others groaned nervously. Sunny's jaw tightened instantly. "This isn't entertainment," Sunny replied sharply. "This is accountability." Natalie shook her head slightly. "No," she said. "Accountability requires honesty. Ambushes require ratings." The crowd lost control. Applause thundered across the studio while a few audience members audibly gasped. Behind the cameras, producers were now visibly panicking. One stage assistant whispered urgently into a headset. Sunny leaned forward again, visibly irritated. "So now you're accusing this show of exploiting conflict?" Natalie looked directly into the camera for a brief second before answering. "I think modern media often confuses aggression with courage." Complete silence. Even the audience stopped moving. Sunny blinked slowly. "You came here knowing we asked difficult questions." Natalie nodded once. "And I'm answering them," she replied. "But difficult questions shouldn't become personal attacks disguised as moral superiority." The audience exploded again. Whoopi raised both hands immediately. Okay, everybody breathe." But Sunny interrupted again. "You think I'm morally superior because I challenged you?" Natalie paused. Then came the moment that changed everything. "No," Natalie answered quietly. "I think you decided who I was before I walked out here." The audience reacted louder than at any point before. One man shouted, "Wow!" Sunny stared at her silently. And for the first time since the interview started, she looked genuinely shaken. Natalie's voice remained calm, but emotion was beginning to show beneath it. "You asked me here as an actress," she continued. "But within minutes, it became about proving whether I deserve public approval. That's not conversation. That's interrogation." Sunny's face hardened again. "Well, public figures don't get immunity from criticism." Natalie nodded immediately. "I agree completely." "Then why are you uncomfortable?" Natalie leaned slightly closer now. "Because criticism and hostility are not the same thing." The audience burst into applause once more. Even some audience members who had been supporting Sunny earlier now seemed uncertain. The tension had become impossible to ignore. Joy Behar quietly sipped from her mug, avoiding eye contact entirely. Whoopi exhaled heavily. Sunny looked determined not to back down. "You know," she said carefully, "a lot of viewers are tired of celebrities acting above accountability." Natalie's eyes narrowed slightly. "And a lot of viewers," she answered, "are tired of television rewarding confrontation more than understanding." The studio erupted again. This time the applause lasted several seconds. Sunny looked out toward the audience, clearly frustrated by the reaction. Then she turned back toward Natalie with a question that instantly changed the atmosphere again. "So let me ask directly," Sunny said. "Do you think people like me are part of the problem?" The room went dead silent. Natalie stared at her. Whoopi's eyes widened immediately. A producer backstage literally stopped moving. And Natalie Portman finally gave the answer nobody expected. She leaned forward slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think people stop hearing each other," she said, "when winning becomes more important than truth." The silence afterward felt enormous. Heavy, uncomfortable, and the cameras captured every second of it. For a long moment, nobody at the table spoke. The audience sat frozen in anticipation, caught between shock and fascination. Even the studio crew seemed uncertain whether to cut to commercial or let the moment breathe. The tension hanging over the set of The View had stopped feeling like daytime television. It felt personal now. Raw. Like two intelligent women standing on opposite sides of an invisible line neither wanted to cross first. But Sunny Hostin finally broke the silence. "So now this is about truth?" she asked, her tone quieter but sharper than before. Natalie Portman held her gaze calmly. "It should be." Sunny leaned back in her chair, folding her arms tightly. "Interesting. Because some people would argue truth also means answering difficult questions directly instead of philosophically." A nervous ripple moved through the audience again. Whoopi immediately sensed where the conversation was heading. "All right," she said carefully, trying to lighten the atmosphere. "We don't need to turn this into a courtroom." But Sunny wasn't ready to step away. "No, because I think this matters," she continued. "There's this growing culture where celebrities want praise for being socially aware, but the second someone presses them for specifics, suddenly the media becomes toxic." A few audience members clapped. Natalie noticed it immediately. And for the first time all interview, something flashed across her face that looked dangerously close to frustration. "You keep framing this," Natalie said slowly, "as though I'm refusing accountability. I'm sitting here answering every question you ask." Sunny responded instantly. "But you're answering them in a way that protects you." The audience reacted again. Natalie let out a quiet breath through her nose, almost like she was trying to steady herself emotionally before speaking. "You know what's fascinating?" she said softly. "You keep using words like protect, cautious, selective, as if complexity itself is suspicious." Sunny tilted her head. "Complexity becomes suspicious when it only appears under pressure." "Oh my God," Joy muttered under her breath, barely audible, but enough for nearby microphones to catch it. Social media producers backstage were already clipping moments in real time. One assistant whispered, "This is going viral before the segment even ends." Natalie turned slightly toward Sunny now, no longer smiling at all. "I've spent my entire career trying to speak thoughtfully because words matter," she said. "But today it feels like you're less interested in understanding me than exposing me." Sunny's eyes narrowed. "Or maybe," she shot back, "you're uncomfortable because someone isn't treating you delicately." The audience gasped loudly. Whoopi rubbed her forehead immediately. Okay. But Natalie answered before Whoopi could redirect. "I didn't come here expecting delicacy," she replied calmly. "I came here expecting fairness." Sunny gave a small, incredulous laugh. "Fairness? Celebrities have entire teams managing their image every day. And television has entire teams manufacturing conflict," Natalie fired back. The audience exploded. Several people actually stood up clapping before quickly sitting back down when they realized how intense the exchange had become. Sunny stared at Natalie in disbelief. "You think this is manufactured?" Natalie's voice became colder. "I think conflict has become profitable." Complete silence. Every host at the table looked uncomfortable now. Whoopi leaned toward Sunny slightly. "Maybe we should move on to the film." But Sunny cut her off again. "No, because now I'm curious." She turned directly toward Natalie. "If you dislike these conversations so much, why keep coming onto platforms like this?" Natalie blinked slowly. Then she smiled. But it wasn't a warm smile anymore. "Because I still believe conversations can matter," she answered. "Even difficult ones." Sunny immediately leaned in. "Then why does every difficult question suddenly become an attack?" Natalie shook her head. "It's not the difficulty. It's the intention behind it." The audience murmured loudly again. Sunny's voice sharpened further. "So my intentions are bad now?" Natalie paused, and for the first time, there was visible emotion in her eyes. Not anger. Exhaustion. "I think," she said carefully, "we're living in a moment where people confuse humiliation with honesty." The room erupted. A woman near the front whispered, "She's destroying her." But others were visibly siding with Sunny too, shaking their heads and folding their arms. The audience itself had become divided. Sunny noticed. And somehow that only made her more determined. "You know what I hear?" Sunny said firmly. "I hear someone very skilled at sounding profound without actually saying anything concrete." Several audience members gasped again. Natalie looked stunned for half a second. Not because the comment hurt, because of how personal it had become. Even Whoopi finally stepped in harder. "Sunny." But Sunny kept going. "No, seriously. We've spent 20 minutes dancing around basic accountability." Natalie's composure cracked ever so slightly then. "You keep saying accountability," she replied, her voice finally rising a little. "But accountability to who? To social media? To television audiences demanding perfect answers to impossible issues? To the public," Sunny answered immediately. Natalie nodded once. "I owe the public honesty," she said. "Not performance." Sunny laughed sharply. "And who decides the difference?" Natalie answered without hesitation. "Usually not the loudest person in the room." The audience lost control. Gasps. Applause. Someone shouted, "Whoa!" Sunny froze. Her expression changed instantly. That line had landed harder than anything before it. For the first time, even the other hosts looked genuinely worried. Sunny leaned back slowly, crossing her arms tighter. "You know," she said coldly, "there's a certain arrogance in assuming disagreement equals noise." Natalie's eyes stayed fixed on hers. "And there's danger," she replied quietly, "in treating aggression like moral authority." Another eruption from the crowd. Whoopi finally threw both hands up. "We're going to commercial before somebody flips this table." The audience laughed nervously, breaking the tension for half a second. But the cameras hadn't fully cut yet. And that's when viewers noticed something unexpected. Sunny wasn't smiling anymore. Not television smiling. Not host smiling. She looked genuinely offended. Meanwhile, Natalie sat perfectly still, though her hands were clasped tightly together beneath the table. The only sign she was feeling the pressure at all. As the show finally cut to commercial, producers rushed onto the stage immediately. Microphones lowered. Assistants hurried between chairs. One producer crouched beside Sunny, speaking urgently into her ear. Another approached Natalie carefully. "You okay?" the producer asked quietly. Natalie nodded politely, but she looked emotionally drained already. Across the table, Sunny was speaking rapidly with producers, visibly frustrated. Audience members whispered loudly among themselves. "This is insane." She called her aggressive. "No," Sunny started it. "Did you see Natalie's face?" Phones lit up across the studio despite staff asking people not to record. Online, clips were spreading at terrifying speed. Natalie Portman shuts down Sunny Hostin. The View interview goes off the rails. Live TV tension explodes. Backstage, network executives had already begun calling producers. Some wanted the conversation toned down after commercial. Others wanted them to lean into it because ratings were surging in real time. And when the countdown finally began for the show to return live, nobody at that table looked the same anymore. Sunny adjusted her microphone silently, her expression unreadable. Natalie stared out toward the audience for a brief second, almost like she was reconsidering whether she even wanted to continue. Then the red camera light switched back on. Whoopi forced a smile instantly. "We are back with Natalie Portman." The applause came slower this time. Uneasier, because everyone in that studio knew something now. This wasn't just another celebrity interview anymore. It had become a battle over pride, perception, and control. And neither woman was willing to lose on live television. The applause faded quickly after the commercial break, swallowed by the tension that still gripped the studio. Nobody smiled naturally anymore. Not the hosts. Not the audience. Even the cameramen seemed hesitant to move too suddenly, like one wrong angle might make the entire atmosphere explode again. At the center of it all sat Natalie Portman and Sunny Hostin, facing each other across the table with the kind of quiet intensity usually seen in courtroom dramas, not daytime television. Whoopi Goldberg tried again to regain control. "So," she said with forced brightness, "Natalie's new film explores emotional isolation and identity." But Sunny interrupted before she could finish. "And honestly," Sunny said, still looking directly at Natalie, "this conversation kind of connects to that." A few audience members groaned softly. Whoopi closed her eyes for a brief second. Natalie looked down at the table, almost disappointed the argument was continuing. Sunny leaned forward. "You said earlier that people confuse aggression with moral authority," she began. "But isn't silence also a form of power?" Natalie looked back up slowly. "You keep returning to silence," she replied calmly, "as though people owe the public constant access to their thoughts. When you influence millions?" Sunny shot back. "Maybe they do." The audience reacted again. Natalie nodded slowly, but this time her patience looked thinner. "You know what worries me?" she asked quietly. "That we've created a culture where people demand instant emotional declarations before they even understand the issue themselves." Sunny folded her arms. "Or maybe people are tired of privileged neutrality." Gasps swept across the studio. Even Joy Behar muttered, "Oh boy." Natalie's eyes narrowed slightly. "Neutrality," she repeated. Sunny held firm. "Yes, because staying above conflict is easy when you're protected from consequences." For the first time all interview, Natalie actually laughed. But it wasn't humor. It was disbelief. "You think being publicly dissected for 20 years means I've avoided consequences?" The audience applauded loudly. Sunny immediately answered, "You're one of the most respected actresses in Hollywood. Let's not pretend power hasn't benefited you." Natalie nodded once. "Of course it has," she admitted. "And I've never denied that." The room quieted slightly. For a second, it seemed the conversation might finally soften. But then Sunny asked the question that changed everything. "So why does accountability make you defensive?" The audience went silent instantly. Natalie stared at her for several seconds before speaking. "You keep using that word," she said quietly. "But what you really seem to want is confession." The crowd erupted. Whoopi leaned back hard in her chair. Sunny blinked. "A confession?" she repeated sharply. Natalie's voice stayed controlled. but emotion had fully entered it now. Yes, you want public figures to sit in front of cameras and perform guilt in ways audiences can consume emotionally. That's not true, Sunny fired back immediately. Isn't it? Natalie asked. The room froze again. Natalie leaned slightly forward now, speaking more openly than she had all interview. Look at what's happening here, she continued. We started discussing art, storytelling, human experience, and within minutes the conversation became about proving whether I deserve public approval. Sunny's jaw tightened, because public figures shape culture. And television shapes outrage, Natalie replied instantly. Applause exploded again. Sunny looked toward the audience in frustration before turning back. You really think this is about outrage? Natalie didn't hesitate. I think outrage has become entertainment. The audience reaction became deafening. Some people clapped wildly. Others shook their heads. The division inside the room was becoming impossible to ignore. And Sunny could feel the audience slipping away from her. Her tone sharpened immediately. You know what I find interesting? She said. Every time you're challenged, you turn the conversation into a critique of media itself. Natalie answered softly. Because media matters. Sunny leaned closer. No, because it lets you avoid answering directly. Natalie's expression hardened completely then. No, she replied firmly. It lets me question the framework of the conversation. The audience burst into applause again. Sunny exhaled sharply through her nose. This is exactly what people mean, she said. You're intellectualizing accountability. Natalie sat back slowly. And you're simplifying humanity into slogans. A massive collective gasp filled the studio. One audience member literally covered his face with both hands. Whoopi immediately jumped in. Okay, everybody. But Sunny wasn't backing down anymore. No, because I'm tired of this idea that asking direct questions makes someone unfair. Natalie's voice rose slightly again. And I'm tired of public conversations becoming performances of punishment. The tension snapped tighter. Neither woman was blinking now. Neither smiling. Even the audience had stopped reacting loudly because the atmosphere felt too serious. Then Sunny delivered the line nobody expected. Maybe you just don't like losing control of your image. The room exploded. Natalie stared at her in complete silence. That comment hit differently. It wasn't political anymore. It was personal. Whoopi immediately whispered, Sunny. But the damage was already done. Natalie inhaled slowly, visibly trying to contain her emotions. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter than ever. My image? She repeated softly. Sunny held eye contact. Yes. Natalie nodded once. Then she said something that changed the energy of the entire interview. You know what's sad? She asked quietly. You keep assuming this is about protecting my image, because you can't imagine someone genuinely valuing nuance. Silence. Absolute silence. Sunny's expression flickered for half a second. Natalie continued. Not every conversation needs a villain. The audience erupted into applause so loud it nearly drowned out the microphones. But Natalie wasn't finished. And honestly, she added, emotion finally breaking through her composure, I think people are exhausted. Exhausted by every discussion becoming a public trial where empathy disappears. Some audience members actually stood up clapping now. Sunny looked stunned by the reaction. But empathy, Sunny argued quickly, cannot replace accountability. Natalie nodded immediately. I agree. Sunny blinked, caught off guard by how fast the answer came. Natalie continued calmly. But accountability without empathy becomes humiliation. The room went dead quiet again. That line landed harder than anything else she had said. Even Sunny seemed momentarily unable to respond. Whoopi looked between them carefully, sensing the emotional shift happening live on air. Natalie looked down briefly before speaking again. You know, she said softly, I almost didn't come today. The audience murmured loudly. Sunny looked genuinely surprised. Natalie gave a small, sad smile. Because I knew this might happen. Sunny frowned immediately. What does that mean? Natalie looked directly at her. It means women in public life are constantly forced to prove they're morally worthy enough to speak at all. The audience exploded again. Sunny leaned back, visibly frustrated now. That is not what's happening here. Isn't it? Natalie asked gently. The room fell silent once more. And for the first time all interview, Sunny had no immediate response. The cameras captured every second of it. The hesitation, the pressure, the realization that the conversation had grown far beyond either woman's original intentions. Then suddenly, from somewhere deep in the audience, a voice shouted loudly, "Let her talk!" The crowd erupted instantly. Producers panicked backstage. Whoopi looked completely stunned. Sunny turned toward the audience sharply. And Natalie closed her eyes briefly, as if the entire weight of the moment had finally become overwhelming. Because now the interview wasn't just tense anymore. It was unraveling live on national television. The audience noise kept building after the outburst. "Let her talk." More voices joined in immediately. "Exactly. She's right." Others defended Sunny Hostin just as loudly. "No, answer the questions. This is the view." The studio had split completely down the middle. For the first time in years, producers inside the view looked genuinely afraid they were losing control of the broadcast. Whoopi Goldberg raised both hands urgently. "Everybody calm down. Calm down right now." But the tension had already escaped the table and spread into the audience itself. One producer near the camera platform whispered into his headset, "We need to wrap this now." Another voice answered immediately, "No. Ratings are exploding." And sitting in the center of the chaos was Natalie Portman, suddenly looking less like a Hollywood star and more like someone emotionally exhausted from defending herself for nearly an hour. Sunny adjusted her microphone slowly, trying to regain control of the conversation. "Nobody here is trying to silence you," she said firmly. Natalie looked at her for a long moment before answering. "I don't think you're trying to silence me," she replied quietly. The audience settled slightly. Natalie continued, "I think you're trying to win." The room fell silent again. Sunny stared at her. "That's unfair." "Maybe," Natalie admitted softly. "But this stopped feeling like curiosity a long time ago." Whoopi exhaled heavily beside them. There was a sadness in the atmosphere now. The excitement from earlier had transformed into something heavier, more personal. Even audience members who had enjoyed the confrontation earlier now looked uncomfortable watching two intelligent women emotionally corner each other on live television. Sunny leaned forward one last time. "So what exactly are you saying?" she asked carefully. "That people shouldn't ask hard questions?" Natalie shook her head immediately. "No," she answered. "I'm saying hard questions lose meaning when compassion disappears from the conversation." The audience applauded again, though softer this time. Not explosive. Reflective. Sunny looked down briefly before responding. "And what about accountability?" Natalie's eyes softened slightly. "Accountability matters," she said. But somewhere along the way, public discourse became more about punishment than understanding. The studio went completely quiet. Even the cameraman had stopped shifting positions. Natalie continued speaking carefully, her voice emotional now, but still controlled. "We treat people like headlines instead of human beings. We demand perfect answers instantly. We reward outrage faster than empathy. And then we wonder why nobody knows how to speak honestly anymore." Several audience members nodded silently. Sunny opened her mouth to respond, but stopped, because for the first time all interview, there was nothing aggressive left in Natalie's voice. No sharp comeback. No defensive energy. Just exhaustion. And somehow that hit harder than every argument before it. Whoopi finally stepped in gently. "I think maybe everybody's carrying a lot right now." Natalie smiled faintly. "Yes," she said quietly. "I think that's true." The atmosphere softened for the first time in nearly 30 minutes. Sunny looked down at her notes before finally speaking again, her tone calmer now. "You know," she admitted, "I wasn't trying to attack you personally." Natalie nodded slowly. "I know." Sunny looked surprised by the answer. "But intent and impact aren't always the same thing," Natalie added gently. The audience murmured in agreement. Sunny sat back silently. For a brief moment, the entire studio felt emotionally exposed. Not victorious. Not defeated. Just raw. Whoopi looked toward the camera carefully, sensing the interview had reached its natural ending. "Well," she said slowly, "this has definitely been a conversation." Nervous laughter spread across the audience. But Natalie suddenly spoke again before the segment could close. "One last thing," she said quietly. Everyone turned toward her instantly. Natalie looked out toward the audience instead of the hosts now, and her expression had completely changed. The tension was gone. Only sincerity remained. "I think we're all forgetting how to listen to each other," she said softly. "Not just on television. Everywhere." Complete silence filled the studio. "You can disagree with someone," she continued, "without needing to destroy them. You can ask difficult questions without trying to humiliate people. And you can care deeply about issues without turning every conversation into war. Some audience members were visibly emotional now. Even Sunny remained completely silent. Natalie smiled sadly. Because if every conversation becomes about winning, she whispered, eventually nobody learns anything. The audience erupted into the loudest applause of the entire show. Not chaotic applause. Not divided applause. Unified applause. People stood to their feet across the studio. Whoopi clapped slowly beside her. Joy Behar nodded quietly. Sunny remained seated for a second longer before finally joining the applause herself, though her expression remained thoughtful and conflicted. And that image, Sunny clapping quietly while Natalie sat emotionally drained beneath the studio lights, became the screenshot that exploded across social media within minutes. By the time the episode ended, clips from the confrontation had already spread everywhere online. The View meltdown goes viral. Natalie Portman stuns Sunny Hostin. Daytime TV's most uncomfortable interview? TikTok creators dissected every sentence. YouTube commentators uploaded reaction videos within hours. Some viewers praised Sunny for asking difficult questions. Others accused the show of turning serious discussions into televised combat. Meanwhile, Natalie's final statement about empathy and public discourse spread across social media faster than anyone expected. Even celebrities began quietly weighing in online. Some defended Natalie's composure. Others defended Sunny's persistence. But almost everyone agreed on one thing. They had just witnessed one of the most emotionally intense interviews daytime television had seen in years. And backstage after the cameras shut off, the silence was almost awkward. Sunny removed her microphone slowly. Natalie stood from her chair carefully. For a brief second, the two women looked at each other without cameras, without applause, without producers shouting directions. Just two people exhausted by the weight of public conversation. Then Natalie gave a small nod. Sunny nodded back. No dramatic reconciliation. No final argument. Just mutual exhaustion. And maybe understanding. Natalie quietly thanked the crew before walking off stage as audience members continued whispering about what they had just witnessed. Some called it brave. Others called it uncomfortable. But nobody called it forgettable. And now we want to hear from you. Was Natalie Portman right about modern media rewarding outrage over understanding? Or was Sunny Hostin justified in pushing for accountability on live television? Drop your opinion in the comments below because this debate is far from over. And if you enjoyed this explosive celebrity confrontation, make sure you subscribe to the Echo View, like this video, and turn on notifications for more dramatic Hollywood stories, emotional clashes, and unforgettable moments from the world of entertainment.